let's explore more into the world of the providers. So, as you can see here with this example that I have right here, I have added some more providers, and you have to do the same thing as with the Azure RM. You have to specify what the source is, where you can get the provider from, and then you also have to specify the version constraints. This also needs to be the correct name of the Azure, not the Azure, the whatever provider it is that you're planning on using. These four providers that I have right here, I currently don't need these. These are only needed if the types of resources that you're trying to make and the infrastructure you're trying to use requires them, which is going to be a bit of a trial and error. For example, I'm aware that if I were to try and create an Azure storage account, that I would need the random provider because it's part of creating the storage account. So I would need to add that block if I were going to try and create an Azure RM storage account. And some of these others you might need, such as the Kubernetes for a Kubernetes cluster, Helm for Helm deployments, and so on. Now, if I run the Terraform init, it's now going to update my lock file right here with these different provider versions that I've listed off here. So it's going to take a moment to install them. All I've said is just get the latest version of them. So that's what it's going to go ahead and do. Okay, so it successfully did that. Let's go to the lock file, and you can see that's been populated with even more. Following an alphabetical order, we have the Azure AD provider. It once again gives this special hash, the constraints, and then specifically what version you are using. And you can look along with all the others. I also had Helm, I had Kubernetes, and I had random. So I went ahead and installed all of those for me, and now I know exactly what version that I'm using in my code. Now, if I wanted to possibly do some other things with the providers that I have, previously I said that you need to list off the provider block right here. That is not true. You do not have to do that. With this provider block right here, it is optional. Just with these other ones, you saw that the random Helm, Kubernetes, and Azure AD were all installed, and they can also be used in my infrastructure, even though they don't have a provider block. So that the reason these exist is to just give you more control over the specific settings that you are going to want in it. So it's optional and it's helpful. Now, let's say that I had an Azure RM provider and that I wanted to be able to do more with it. So I have one Azure RM provider that has certain configuration for it, but this right here, I may want to have an additional Azure subscription. That's a pretty bad idea. I would not recommend doing that. I think you should only handle one subscription per setup right here. So I would not recommend doing this at all, but just for teaching purposes, I'm going to act as if I wanted to create configuration for two different Azure subscriptions. So I would specify what the second Azure subscription is. I don't actually have a second subscription, so I don't have anything to put in here. I'd put the tenant ID in here. And then over here in my resource group, I have specified a second resource group. So you're probably asking yourself, how can we make it so that the code will be able to use the right provider given the circumstances? This one was declared first, so this one is the one that's going to be used by default. And you can see with this one right here, it has this alias word right here. Alias means alternate name. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to use this alias name whenever there's a case that I want it to use this second Azure RM provider. So it's going to use this one by default, but I have a way to make it so that this can be used instead. And if you go to the resource group, you can see that. You can see that I have the provider right here, which is Azure RM .secondary, which is what I defined right here. Azure RM being the provider, and then the alias name being secondary. So now when I come over here to this right here, it's going to create this resource group in the other Azure subscription that I've defined. So now I have different configuration for this, and it's a specific thing that I want to do. The reason that you would make a second provider of a provider you already have is because you want things to function differently. And things can get complicated quickly if you are making more than one Kubernetes clusters, or even with one Kubernetes cluster with a storage account. So this is an option that you have. You usually don't need this, but it is helpful. Another way that you can do this is, we will talk more about modules in the future, but for this one, let's say that I had a module, which I've just randomly called example. So I specify the source of where I'm going to be getting this, and then more to the point, I focus on what provider it is that I want to be using. So what Terraform is telling the code here is that when you are running the code that is in this module, use this provider, Azure RM secondary. So it's going to run the code in here, and it's going to run it with this Azure subscription and with this tenant ID. So that way you can make it so that just the code that's inside of that module is using that provider with its specific settings. One last thing that I want to specify about providers is you should generally only use the providers that you need. So these ones that I put here, this is a mistake because I don't need them right now, so I shouldn't install them. And then this right here isn't helpful at all. It's not something that I'd want to do. So I'm only going to want to use the things that I feel are important for the code that I'm using. So commenting all of these out is the way to go because I don't need them, and I should always be using the least amounts that I can. So this was just an exploration into what you can do with these different kinds of providers. In the repository, I will leave these commented out, but I will leave the code here in case you want to experiment with it. Thanks.